Hello, Hoovians, and welcome back to the third channel. We are back, woohoo, with the interviews. Ooh. If you have been watching the Tom Mason Empire, you will know that Taskmaster World has had a lot of interviews like, oh yes, that is correct. So is Tom Mason, that is correct. Now it's time for the weird side. Today, we'll crack straight on because we've got a very special guest. My guest is best known for appearing in the, I'm going to say BBC 4, but I might be wrong on that one, sitcom with the one and only Miriam Margolyes. It's the one and only Frog Stone!
Hello! Hi! Hello!
So, let's start at the very beginning, because Julie Andrews won't shut up and keeps on saying it's a very good place to start.
Well, you know, I'm a big Julie Andrews fan.
And how did you get into acting?
Well, the short version of that is I grew up in Preston and I went to a local little drama club as a child that was nothing beyond what it sounds like. Didn't really have much opportunity at school. Then when I went to university, I got into it big time. And did a lot of comedy stuff, also did some drama stuff, improv plays and stuff. And then it was when I was up at Edinburgh Festival, the Fringe, I happened to be seen by an agent that I hadn't invited, just happened to be back in those days, who ultimately wrote to me and took me on, and that's how it began.
And then how did acting then lead into you doing your writing work?
Well, I guess I always did both. So when I was at uni, we, as I said, did lots of comedy that I'd written myself anyway, and plays that we had, I'd written and things. So I'd always kind of done both, to be honest. But I didn't want to or feel like I could pursue sort of writing and on its own. I was more interested in a way, just letting things come to me, which sounds a little bit silly. And I probably should have been more proactive early on with writing, but I guess I didn't necessarily feel I had everything enough to say. But then over time, I ended up writing some more, did some more Edinburgh live shows as a professional, and started that way, basically, through comedy things, which I think is how, as a performer and a writer, that you then move into it. But subsequently, I've written things I've been in, but I've also now written things I haven't been in.
And when you're writing, because you've got a massive CV, the CV is longer than my arm. I'm quite small when I'm stood up.
Fair enough.
So that analogy works. Do you prefer writing for TV or radio?
I think I prefer writing for TV because I do think very visually, or filmically, and radio was a means to do comedy sketches, little bits and bobs, weird stuff that was cheaper and safer, I suppose. So there was more opportunities in that sense. You're more likely to get something made, though I don't think that's the case these days because everything being shrunk. I think it's very unlikely to get anything made now in many ways. But I've always liked TV and film and theatre, and so radio in a way is similar because there's more space for dialogue and fun and words. It was TV less so. The visuals obviously have to count for a huge amount, and they're the expensive part as well, really. But I think I always imagine the TV version of anything that I've come up with.
And so, with you saying that you like write for TV, did you enjoy writing the seminal classic Bucket?
I did enjoy writing it. I did. It was a long process. It started out as something else entirely, as an idea that was about, it was a kind of all about Eve, pretend true life documentary about trying to make a biopic of Miriam Margolyes. That was the original idea. And trying to track her down and trying to get her involved in this, and then doing this thing turned into this big stage show. And it was a kind of a film idea in itself, like a one-off. I guess you could break down into telly, but it was a one story in that way. And it seems funny to say that at the point of that, Miriam, whilst also being very famous, was not in the public eye to the same extent as she subsequently became, thanks to me. But, the Graham Norton stuff hadn't happened as much. So it started off as that idea, right, which had an interesting sort of story about what became of the person I was playing in it, the sort of Miriam fan as it had been. And then that ended up sort of weirdly, I made that happen in real life by ending up writing a sitcom in which we would both be in, which wasn't what I had intended, but that's what came out of it, because I had a meeting with Channel 4 initially, who paid for this original idea to write it, this Miriam sort of biopic, Making Miriam it was called. And then they were like, oh, but actually, obviously, we're not going to do that exactly because yada, yada, yada. We'd be more interested in a series. So do you want to come up with a series idea, which is sort of similar, but not? And that was the genesis. So it took a while. And that's when I then started writing the script. And some of it was when you're writing a sitcom, here's the thing, this I will pass on. Your pilot episode will, whether it gets made or not, will go through a long evolution and people getting involved and changing it a lot, partly for the better, because you're finding out what the hell it is you're going to do. And what the initial idea isn't necessarily anything that is going to be exactly what it is. And that takes ages. Then when you write other episodes and stuff, you have a fraction of the time to do it. And it's just much more established and in your bones and in your blood. And it doesn't change as much. You'll still do loads of drafts, but it doesn't change in the way that pilot. So I think I found, if I look back now on that period of many, many, many months of the initial script and how it changed, if I'm really honest, there was a high point towards the end that was not the final version. The final version had to change massively due to time, money, location, all of those things, and to spread out the story. And the early versions, I think I must have thought they were good at the time, but then I really quickly didn't, and they were rubbish. And if I couldn't even bear to look at what I wrote now because it would be so bad compared to where we got to. But I think that's also part of the process of starting and finishing and where I am now, having written so much more, and how I feel about things. So there was a freedom to writing it initially, which I did really love. But then there was also that sort of wading through treacle where you just know it isn't right yet, but there's no right for it to be. So you have to find it. Yeah. By the time you're doing episodes 2 and 3, by the time I'm writing stuff now, I'm much quicker at recognizing where I need to go.
And do you think you would have wrote the show any better if you wrote it now with all your new skills you've learned?
Yes, is the short answer. But I also think sometimes you look back and go, God, I was much funnier when I was 18. Because there's a weight of like knowledge and whatever that weighs on you. And not that I was 18 when I wrote it, but I'm just saying, I think there was some freshness and some originality there that I wouldn't have now. I'd be more cynical and more professional in some ways, but that might have taken away some of the raw charm from it. So I think I would have found it easier to, if I was going to start from now, there's some stuff I would know that I didn't know then. But that cuts both ways, doesn't it? Comedy is in many ways at its best when it isn't polished and perfect, I think. And, you know, it's a BBC show with a budget that's tiny compared to if you're watching some American, you know, Ted Lasso or something, yada, yada, yada. So I think in there's probably some good bits that I would have lost if I did it now, and some rubbish bits I'd make better. So in the end, maybe it would all be the same.
And when you come up with this idea, did you already ask Miriam if she wanted to do it, or was it a hard process to get her involved?
No, it's quite an easy process to get her involved, funnily enough. But that was because I'd had this initial idea, and then the production company who were interested in me in this initial idea, we had a lunch with Miriam, just to, you know, and I don't think she ever says no to a lunch or any meal. And so that was fun. And that was a bit of like, okay, do we, you know, is this going to work or not as a concept? So then she was sort of on board. Now it takes a long time, but, you know, Miriam's been in the business for a long time. So that isn't that wasn't phased her. I think now when, if you talk to some people like, how's your show going? And you're like, oh my God, it's only been like a week. Come back next year and I'll tell you like how the process of development is going. So I wasn't scared of losing her either, even though it took quite a while from that initial lunge to actually filming. It was quite concertinaed, actually. The development process is ages. And then when they say go, they needed it like yesterday. And we had an incredibly short time in which for me to actually write it and film it, like much, much, much less than normal even. And even in England, that's quite a short time. So it didn't take ages to get her on board, or anybody actually. We got a really great cast. They all did it. But sometimes that can be a problem. And projects fall because somebody was available and then they're not, But in this case, we were okay.
And when you're writing, do you type it on a computer, or do you go the traditional route and write it with a pen and paper?
I do it on a computer. And that's because I write in Final Draft, in a screenwriting program, which saves you a lot of time editorially, because that's what it has to be professionally anyway. There's no other way that you could do it. So it's in my blood now. It's part of the course. I write my ideas in books and on my phone and notes more manually. And but when it comes to writing script, I do it on a computer. Yeah, because you edit it as you go anyway, and you save it, and that's how it has to look. Also, if you are doing it on a computer, you have a page count, a timing count, and you have a vague sense structurally of how it will be. Now, people will tell you there are rules, and there are, but then you can also break them. But if I was doing it like when I was young, when I was at school, I didn't have a computer, so I'd write everything by hand. And when I was at university, we'd write everything by hand. Then you type it up in a computer. But I don't need to do that part of the process because I have a computer now. So that's what I do.
And when you're writing, or when you're writing out your scripts, how do you know once an hour is finished?
So that is, broadly speaking, in a program called Final Draft, it's around about a minute a page-ish. So that's a good indication. Now, when you can read it out loud yourself, you can make the machine read it out loud, and there'll be some margin of error on that. But that's roughly what it is. So if you were doing, now it will change. If you've just got loads of quickfire dialogue, it'll be much quicker. If you're describing a stunt that's taking place in real time, or you've got some location change, then it will take a bit longer. I found that if you're doing a commercial hour, which I've just written, so it's actually sort of 45 minutes, 46 minutes with the adverts, but also if it's a prestige kind of show, where they have money, they'll be doing establishing shots and things like this. So actually probably write about 41 pages, because the stunts, the visuals, the establishes are going to take a lot longer. And it's not just sort of quick fire. But these timings on a script are not definitive. If you're writing a half-hour sitcom, it's great to aim for around 30 pages. 35 would be okay. 28 would be okay on Final Draft, because it's development and things will get cut and things will get changed. You don't want to write something too short, as happens, because things will inevitably be cut, edited, because it didn't look right or didn't work in the end, whatever it is. You don't want to write something too long because nobody will read it. It's the absolute truth.
Well, for anyone that wants to buy Final Draft, this isn't sponsored, but it's a good fact. Student or you're in education, doesn't matter what age, you can get, I think it's 20% off discount. You just need to show identification that you're in form of education. If you're a teacher or a student, you get a discount.
And there are other software things that other people use, and lots of different ones, and lots of them now you can still, it's just Final Draft has become like you save it and it looks like a script. But there are other ones. I don't use anything else because I am just that lazy. I have it set up on my computer and I can't be bothered to think about something else because I don't know what the difference would be. But I'm sure there are some people don't like Final Draft and whatever. So just saying, there are other options.
There is. And so not only have you written your own things and you've acted in your own things, you've also appeared in so much British TV. You're probably the most recognisable person, and they'll recognise you the moment they see you. Oh, it's from whatever. But what was it like appearing in Ashes to Ashes?
Oh God, that was a great job. I have been lucky, just to say, if you don't recognize me, which 99% of people will not, fair enough. Because I've been in lots of great stuff, but I've also been small parts in it. But so Ashes to Ashes was a really fantastic job, actually, because I was only in it for a day or whatever. It was a tiny little thing. But what was good about it was that I had watched a bit of Ashes to Ashes and was quite into it. And I think I just got offered the part from reading for something else, tiny little bit, but it was funny. And I got to then be in all the sets. So I got to walk around all the sets because it was filmed not that far away from me, actually. It's in Bermondsey, I think. And it was all studio. So Alex's house and all of the things, the station. So that was particularly exciting because I had actually genuinely been interested in the show. It was like Coronation Street when I did that. It's a bit like, you walk onto the set and it feels exciting. Whereas most of the time you've no idea what it's going to be like. And actually I never watch myself in stuff. I never tend to, but I was obsessed with finding out at the end of Ashes to Ashes what it was all going, where it was all going. So that was a particularly exciting one.
And do you get like starstruck when you like met the cast of this program you've been watching for so long?
No, I think that's because maybe when I very first started, I think I did a couple of jobs where I genuinely, these were actors. I was like, oh my God, wow, excited. But very quickly, I'm pretty chatty and you make friends, or you don't make friends, or whatever it is. So I think I was like, oh gosh, this is a big, cool project. But otherwise, no. And I don't know why that is. I think it comes down to I've met enough people in my life and on telly that I've been disappointed many a time. So I don't necessarily have expectations beyond like, maybe they'll be nice and we'll have a good chat, or maybe they won't. And so I think my expectations are always managed.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, expect nothing, because you never know.
Yeah. And because you'd already said that you don't watch yourself back as TV, but if you've written something, do you watch it back so you get to feeling of how your written work is being performed back to you?
Well, okay, so some people always say this to reassure writers and actors and performers, and it's sort of true and sort of annoying. There are 3 different versions. There's the one you write, the one you shoot, and the one you edit. And it's true. The final version of anything, film, whatever, is never the same as when you read it on the page, whether I've written it or somebody else has written it, because so much stuff happens in between, good and bad. There's also a 4th version, right? Which is the one in your head. And that is the perfect ideal. And nothing, even when I read it out, I'm like, oh my God, it sounded better in my head. How has it gone so weird? I think now, a bit further down the line, I'd probably be better at demanding that I'm able to see edits and rushes. But initially, you're not. You're very much kept out of the process unless you are quite a big star. And I would say there'd be people who you might think are big stars who still don't get the treatment that they probably should. Writers are famously cut out of everything, And having been a writer and an actor on this theatre thing that I did, I wrote a scene for this thing, and then I also ended up being in the bigger picture. So I got to see how the writers and the actors were treated differently, because I was treated very well as an actor. And I assume that was partly because I'd written something as well, but then it turns out the other writers who wrote other bits didn't get, acknowledged. So that's pretty common, right? So as a performer, it's you're not used to being treated as if you're not meant to be there. Whereas a writer is always treated like they're not really meant to be there unless they have high status for whatever reason. Now, I think I would know what I wanted to see and what I didn't want to see, where I had to walk away. I think it's quite important, again, now I would know more, that if I've written it, you have to just leave your writer hat at the door and just act it. And then you have to leave your actor hat at the door if you're watching stuff back and think editorially as a writer, which is easier said than done. But whether you are allowed to do that depends entirely on producers. So, until you have a executive producer credit, and even then.
And with Bucket, because it's a BBC sitcom, and because it's, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, well liked, do you reckon it'll ever get put on DVD or even Blu-ray?
So it's not a BBC sitcom in that they were just the broadcaster, but they weren't the production company. So they don't own the rights. The rights are owned. I think theoretically I have a share in them. But, technically it's a media conglomerate called All3 Media, which has lots of different production houses that are sort of part of that who own it. So they have sold. The reason why it's not on iPlayer or anything like that is because BBC would have to pay for it to buy it, to put it on. So All3 put it on in Australia. It's been in Australia and released on DVD in Australia and Blu-ray. And I've had that sent to me because it's an Australian one. And it's been on BritBox, I think, in America, and or Acorn, or both, I think, actually. They put it on all of these different, and BritBox maybe is part BBC owned, but it's still, the rights belong to that. So that's why some things are produced in-house, less and less these days, and most things are produced by an independent production company who take the project. BBC might fund it along with other people, or however it works. But so yes, so in that sense, that's why a lot of stuff you'll notice doesn't end up back on iPlayer unless it's come from in there initially, because it costs money for every single year that they do it. They don't have a right to have it permanently. I wish it was, but I have no power in that respect.
Well, the last time I looked, and I haven't looked recently, it is available on Acorn TV in the UK.
Right. Okay.
I know that for a fact. And BritBox in America and the rest of the world is partly owned by the BBC, but in the UK they sold all their shares to ITV in the UK.
Interesting. All I can say is I have never received a penny beyond the broadcast of it on BBC. In theory, one might hope one day residuals will make it to me, but they haven't, even though it's been sold all around the world, because that's how it works.
And not only have you written stuff for sitcoms and whatnot, you've also written some additional material for the news quiz. Now, what is the process for that? Because it's not the main material, but it's additional. How does that?
There's no difference at all. That's like, so maybe it's different now, but that news quiz, I've done various bits of sketch writing. I've done additional material on films as well, where it literally is, I just come up, or on set writing, where you rewrite a scene. But your credit, because of Writers Guild or unions in America, is very, very clear about who does what. With the news quiz element, they have the people who are at that time who are the salaried writers for BBC comedy or radio, who are the established ones, and they would have a head writer, and then they might have a different person, so they get the written by credits, but then they have an additional person, and that would be me, and we all did all the same things. Yeah. So there's no difference. You're just contributing jokes, and they get whoever the producer and the editor and the head writer decides what goes in the final script. But that's how that works.
And when you hear this material, does it bring you joy that your material's made it into the final?
Yeah, always. When it's live as well, so you hear an audience in the theatre laugh, as I've done on radio shows and on theatre shows as well. That is brilliant. That is the best thing. It's like a relief and a total buzz. It's awesome. And you don't get that with telly. It's still nice when you watch things or clips and stuff, or people are laughing, but you don't have control over it. It's been edited in that way, and you can't tweak it to the room. Whereas live stuff is always like to the room, playing a little bit. There's always something that's just so immediate, which is very gratifying. Yeah.
And when you write shows that are like halfway through a series or been going for years, do you have to do you watch the shows to get a feel of how it's written? So, for example, the 4 O'Clock Club is an example.
Yeah, I've done a couple of series of that. Yes, so that was different, but I haven't done a lot of that. And I don't know if that plays to my strengths brilliantly. And probably shouldn't say that because I need work, guys. You know, we all do. We was looking for the next job, but that was fine. I watched it, so I got the rhythm. And then there's a lot of stuff to read about the characters and the arcs and stuff. So you know where you're going. And what you watch it because you get a sense of tone, and also you hear the actors generally, so you get their voice, and that's so important. But of course, joining it, you're not the person who shaped and created it. So it doesn't come as easily. And what I've just finished writing is a thriller, actually, which is for Finland. It's a Scandinavian thriller. It's a long story is how I came involved. But I was head writer on that, and I wrote 4 of the 6 episodes. And that is hard work because you have to think very carefully about every single element of it. So you're doing the development and the writing and leading other people to make sure they've got it right. There's only really one other person in the end, so it wasn't that difficult. But he was excellent, really brilliant writer. So that just made it all fabulous. But it's a lot of responsibility on one hand, the empty page, but then it's satisfying. So I like being able to do a bit of somebody else's show, learn, enjoy, build. But sometimes, in a way, I find that quite hard as well, because you just don't quite know if you're getting it right.
Yeah, and you just mentioned there that you were working on a Finnish program. Did you have to learn Finnish to be able to write, or did you write it in English and someone transcribe it?
I wrote it in English. All the development materials are in English, and English is very much a second language in Finland as a whole. There's only about 5 million people there, and they all speak English as well as they speak Finnish. And there are some international elements of it. So some of it is being translated into Finnish, and some of it will remain in English. I think Finland doesn't have the same international reputation as Danish and Swedish TV does over here and in America. It's smaller, I guess that's why. So they wanted to work with British writers for a variety of reasons, because it's all developed. When they pitch it out at various TV festivals to sell, you know, there's a Finnish TV channel that are doing it, but they have streamers that are all European, right? So because that's how it works. So all the development material is always in English anyway for them. And it's much better if it's in English rather than Finnish translated to English, if you see what I mean. But yeah, so that you have to touch wood in TV, because until it's all filmed, you never know what might happen. But in theory, this autumn it's going to start filming. I've just finished the scripts; they're locked now. Yeah.
And so, because you've said it was a thriller, do you find it easier to write something that's dark and gritty rather than something that people might find funny, because people have different versions of humor?
That's exactly right, basically. You've hit the nail on the head. The one thing that makes it easier is nobody's going to say that's not funny because there are no jokes in there. There might be little character things, and also people are much more forgiving of a little bit of humor in a drama, you know, that somebody might say, because they're not going, right, make me laugh. You know, our expectations of TV and comedy are very, very different as a matter of taste and as a matter of purpose. Like sometimes I want to watch something that's interesting with a story and funny. And then sometimes I just need something like I'm on a plane and I just want to watch a 20-minute comedy that's just like eating sweets. Doesn't mean it's bad. I'm just saying, you know, it's easy, right? I don't have to think or worry. I could watch episode 50 or I could watch episode 30, whatever. I like narrative. I like complication. Sometimes writing a thriller is a little bit like, oh God, you know, I feel the instinct to take the piss and do like make a joke. But the rhythm of a thriller and a comedy is actually very similar, because it's about, is it hitting? Is it landing? Have you got a hook? Have you got a twist? Have you got a surprise? Whether it's funny or dramatic is actually structurally very similar. I think in some ways it's a bit easier to have a laugh in the writer's room when you're talking about crazy ideas as opposed to like really depressing ideas. But then at the end of the day, you can have a bit of a laugh because you can take the piss out of yourself and go to the pub. Whereas after a day of working on comedy, you don't really have a sense of humor anymore because you doubt yourself so much. So kind of swings and roundabouts. Like working on comedies has been the least fun I've had on set. And working on dramas, like I worked on a Holocaust film years and years ago, which couldn't be more like bleak and gritty. We had a great time. We all got on really well because I think the stress that we had to let off was like we were all in the bar every night. Whereas in a comedy, not so much actually.
And when you like finish a day of work, do you get to just, when you get home, do you watch TV and just relax and think about, or are you always working? Oh, they could have done this, they could have done that.
So I love telly and reading as well, and books and film. I love it all. I've got 2 young children, so I don't actually get to go out as much as I would like. So telly is like a real staple. And it's really important to me that that's my, I suppose it's work in a way, but I still love it enough that I sit down and just enjoy it. That's my downtime. I don't watch stuff for work that I'm meant to unless I have to. I think I can say that I was a BAFTA judge this year on scripted comedy. So I was, now it's all been announced, I can say that I was on the judging panel, and I had to watch a lot more shows than make it to the shortlist to help decide the shortlist and then, you know, contribute and thing. So I watched quite a lot of stuff I never would have watched because it's not my taste. And some of it surprised me and I enjoyed it. And then there were some things I'd already watched anyway. And then I watched again because I had to give it the same sort of focus, you know, individually. And some of that did feel like a real chore, you know, like 10 hours in, you're like, okay, no more of this. But you have to watch it because it wouldn't be right to just judge it on my taste. You know what I mean? It's got to think, well, was it good? Did it work? I think if I'm enjoying a show that's far away, an American show that's glossy and fantastic, I might find it inspirational, but I also won't feel competitive or anxious. If I'm watching a British show, I might be like, why am I not in it? And when I'm actually working on a project, my mind is constantly going. So that's why I always have a notebook or a phone. And I'm always like, oh, notes. Oh, that's just made me think of this. Always. And that's why people say being a writer is like having homework 24 hours a day. And it's true. So then I have downtime when I finish this project and I haven't started a new one properly yet. I've got a couple of bits and bobs that I've got to finish, but I haven't started a new one. And I feel anxious, but it's so important that I just wait for the next thing to grow. You know, other people's stuff I can work on, but my big own project, you have to rest.
And you mentioned about being a BAFTA judge, which I think BAFTA is better than the Oscars, personally. And what's the process like to judge them? Do you sit there and do you have a list given to you by BAFTA themselves of what they're looking for?
There is a submission process, I believe, that BAFTA, the professionals at BAFTA initially work on. And so by the time I'm involved, there is some selection has already been made based on the criteria as discussed, right? So I don't have to worry about that. It's me and some other people, and there is a chair of judges to make sure in discussion that it is professional, that it is respectful. There has been previously, I was initially going to be a judge on a different category, but then I'd been in a show with somebody who's nominated from that show. So I couldn't do that, you know? So it oftentimes there'll be some shows and you know the people involved and some shows you don't. And even, you know, so you watch it, you make notes, you think about what is significant and what it might mean. I think there's a lot of discussion about being mindful that a show that is, say, several series in is easy, you know, it's going to be smoother than the very first series of a comedy which hasn't found its feet yet, but still to recognize its relative or individual merits, I should say. So it's very well guided in that sense. Do you know what I mean? It's not just like, I like this, but at the end of the day, it's always going to be taste. And it was funny finding that my tastes might be exactly the same as somebody else's and completely different from somebody else's. And, we could argue about who's right or wrong. And I could, you can debate like the merits of something because you can feel passionate. But fundamentally, it's a matter of taste. Do you like chocolate ice cream? Do you like strawberry ice cream? There's no actual definitive better one. And in comedy, that couldn't be more the case. And I think people forget it and they look at shows that have had a lot of money spent on them, loads and loads and loads, which will make it look lovely. And they've got money for music that other shows don't have, and it will be very, very different, and I think often people forget that.
And fundamentally, when you're being on this judging panel for the greatest award show of the year, do you have fun? Is it fun? Fundamentally, is it fun to do?
Yeah, because I really like what I'm watching. But it is not. It's hard work too, actually, and some you're sharing ideas, and some people might make comments that you're like, what? And you can't get into fisticuffs over it. And in fact, we're all in a separate. It's done. Some of the judging, is done remotely, and so you're not all sitting down watching stuff together.
And do you end up watching the BAFTAs to find see what the reaction is for the people that you've chosen to win their category?
So in theory and in practice on BAFTA, voting is anonymous, right? So there's a big discussion, and then the individual judges will make their mini shortlist and contribute votes anonymously. So that is true. So there is no influencing people or bullying people or anything like that. The discussion might, and it, is relevant, might make you see something in a different light or consider something that perhaps you haven't, which is important, right? And I would definitely say that there was wild debate over some shows that probably didn't even make the shortlist, right? But the show that won was absolutely universally liked by everybody. So it did feel very fair that was the right choice. The other shows that other people liked more, I didn't like. The show that I maybe would be my second choice, whatever it is, which doesn't matter, maybe somebody else didn't like. But I would say it's pretty fair in that respect. So that was actually quite interesting that it wasn't, and we were divided on it. But I mean, I don't actually know what people voted, but I'm just saying what it felt like. So, and then the votes go through, and what the shortlist is from all the ones you've watched, 20, whatever it is, the final 4. But officially, we do not know until BAFTA night who the actual winner is. It could be any one of those 4, but it has been calculated via votes. But I wouldn't know that, obviously, so I couldn't leak it. So it was sort of interesting seeing the reaction to the shortlist, and also thinking, the stuff that didn't make it onto that shortlist, that people still thought was good. So, but I think for this year's scripted comedy, the Derry Girls won, and they hadn't won previously, and they deserved to. And I did think it was and I actually hadn't watched all of it initially. I'd liked it, but then I watched it. And I think that really, the response to that winning and to the other nods was quite heartening. I think in previous years, there's definitely been winners that I wouldn't have liked, but then I wasn't on the panel, was I? But, and maybe, who knows? But it is quite funny, a little bit funny, because you can't say until it's all over. And I didn't say, and I'm very, I understand what it's like to be on both sides, respectful of that, but it's quite sort of interesting knowing something.
And from a writer's point of view, have you learned like different skills from knowing what the BAFTAs look for? Do you learn this is how you elevate the show that you're working on, and this is how you make it slightly better because this is what they've done?
if I'm really honest, Tom, I would say that what really shows on screen and people deny it, but it's true, is money. And that money might have come through time of development, you know, or what they're able to put on the screen with the production values. And I know how hard it is to work with not a lot of money. And I know how comfortable it is to work on a show that does have money. And how that's a trick, right? That we don't think about when we're just watching it. But once you know that, you can see the difference. And people go, this is such an incredible show. That one was rubbish. And I'm like, there's a million reasons why that is. It's got nothing to do with the actual script or even the actors. Sometimes the actors, whatever, but not. So no, being on the BAFTA panel didn't make me go, oh, I can see why that's popular and why something else isn't, because it is a matter of taste. You know, we could be talking about music that you like. Nothing's going to make me want to listen to Motley Crue ever. And nobody wants to listen to some 70s recordings of B-52s like I listen to, say. You know, I've got all manner of weird stuff that I do listen to when I'm writing, but, it's silly to think that taste is meaningful often. But what has given me insight is I spent a stretch on and off being a bit of a sort of behind the scenes working on a soap opera last year, doing a bit of editing, script editing and writing little bits and a bit more editorial role. And that was fascinating because I was on the other side of the table from the writer creator entirely, and I was helping them, but whatever. And I learned so much about what you let go, what you have to make work, what are the little essentials. So I know a lot more now than I did 5 years ago. But making a show is an alchemy. It's like there's so many things that go into it. And I think I've seen stuff that was brilliant on a read through, say, and then didn't really go anywhere. And I might know why I think that might be or not. And then likewise, I've such a things where you've just gone like, this is rubbish. And then people love it. And I'm like, what? And I couldn't tell you why. There are definitely shows which people think are amazing. And I do not understand why. I don't dislike them even. I just don't get it. And that's the way it is for everybody, I guess. You know, that must be true for every single person. There'll be a show that they're like, oh.
And do you have a certain genre of TV that you've not yet worked in that you would like to learn more about to get an in and work on it, whether or not as a writer or as an actor?
Yes. Okay. So I definitely do. Number one, I want to play a baddie. I never play baddies, proper full-on baddies. I think I have in some Big Finish things, maybe. But I'd like to play a proper baddie, a big main role baddie. That is a dream. Be it a psycho, be it an alien, whatever. I've done some Big Finish things, and I was in Jupiter Ascending sci-fi film, and I absolutely loved that by the Wachowskis. And that was amazing, being on a film that was completely like, I mean, I worked on it for ages. Still couldn't really tell you exactly what it was all about, but we had a brilliant time and I really liked it. And there was something sort of, I don't know. So yeah, if you're going to get me to do it, if I could do a Doctor Who telly, I would love that. If I could be a baddie in a Doctor Who telly, I think that would tick all my boxes. I don't want to be Goody. I don't want to be some sort of earnest person, as is my want. Sort of tragic woman or sort of slightly bad-tempered administrator. That's my casting. So yeah, I think there's definitely shows I don't want to work on. I love cozy crime, and I love, but I think I lean towards the taking the mickey element. So I think much as I hear they're great to work on popular crime drama things, I don't think I would necessarily love the experience of those, but I'd like to write my own, if that makes sense.
And so like when you say cozy murder, do you mean like Midsummer Murders?
Yeah, there's loads of them, aren't there? And like, I don't understand why I'm not in an Acorn one, because Acorn seems to run all of them. Like, and they've run Bucket, and I was like, well, where's my cozy crime drama, please? But um, there are loads and loads and loads of them, and the daytime ones as well. And they're big machines. And I don't know if joining one of those big machines I would be good at, but I would like to create my own, which had a sort of slightly more mischievous edge. I suppose that's what I mean.
Yeah. So if Acorn TV are watching, please get on with that, because there's enough crime out there, but we need slightly better crime. I know Sister Boniface Mystery is a hilarious concept.
Yes.
Of a nun being a detective. I do find that hilarious, but we need more different things, not just nuns.
Exactly.
And what was it like working on and being in the worlds of Big Finish?
Well, as always, it's an absolute joy. So I've done it a couple of times, and there's some things I can't talk about. Upcoming, maybe, or not. But the people involved are excellent. And yeah, that really, it's never a chore. It's always a pleasure.
And you mentioned earlier that you don't like watching yourself back, but because the way Big Finish works, for anyone that's not aware, because this is the third channel, how do you listen to yourself back with Big Finish, because it's design, because the sound design's so different to when you're in the booth recording your voice?
Well, what I've heard back, you often hear yourself played back for a couple of reasons. One, for pickups, and two, because they're trying to give direction and say, well, there was this and we need to do that. So you when you're doing audio, you do hear yourself back more, which is that's fine. I don't actually mind hearing myself as much as watching, I think. But that's maybe because you're sort of in it. Like, actually, when you watch rushes, it's not always the case, but sometimes they play back and they show you what you've just shot. And some directors hate that and don't let you. And they are the wrong directors. Because when people let you watch it when you're in it, suddenly you understand what a note might be or something. You get a little sense of being there. And that I really do like. I actually find that easier to understand. After the fact, it's all too late. So I don't like it.
And would you, if you were on TV Doctor Who, what sort of villain would you want to be?
No, you see, I don't know, because I am not Who expert. I was asked this, like, oh, and are you a big fan? Are you an expert? And I said, well, you can't ask me that, because there are people who actually have full PhDs in this, and I do not. So no, I'm an admirer, perhaps, maybe is the better. But I'm not a dedicated expert or fan in that sense. So no, there isn't a particular character or world or line of baddie, whatever it is, that I would want to do, if you see what I mean. It'd have to be a new one just for me.
And have you got any, so without spoiling anything, have you got any upcoming things you are about to talk about that you're over the moon excited for, that's coming to the UK relatively this year?
Okay, so I don't think my Finnish thing, which I am interested, that's the whole thing about me going out to watch some of that being filming, that won't hit the UK until, well, once it's hit Finland first. So that won't be this year. There is something I'm excited about, but I can't talk about it. But I think I've given you a clue as to its genre. The things I've been working on recently are not about to come out. They're a bit earlier stage. I've been working on a couple of features, actually, but that's a way off.
And so do most of the work you do work? Do they like get commissioned and they'll be in like in advance, like in 3 years or 2 years?
I mean, yeah. There's, I guess, because I got a bit older and a bit wiser, I'm a bit more sort of savvy on looking at contracts and stuff, but also, so I might be given some work to work on a redraft of a feature. So I'll become a second the next writer on something that's established IP, as it were, that isn't mine, whatever. That can be a long process. And so I've got a couple of those, you see. So I'm like, they're not even filmed yet. Then I've got something which is about to be filmed. Then I've got something that will be coming to ears, but I don't know when that is actually. But maybe to do with the 60th anniversary or not. But I don't know any more about the dates or anything like that either. And that's about it. I've been writing a lot. That took up a lot of the last 12 months. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know whether... I do the voice of Rosa, the mummy bear on Tish Tash, which is on CBeebies, and we did do some more of that a while ago that I think will be coming out this summer. But again, I'm really on top of it. But if you've got any under fives, I'd recommend they watch it, like Peppa Pig equivalent.
Well, Peppa Pig's getting her own Audible podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know how it's going to work, but it's going to be something very, very intriguing. Now, one of the things you've worked on that not many people will notice that is you, but now, but once I mention it, you will go, oh, that is, yeah, and they'll click in the reds. What were they like working on Fresh Meat?
Oh, goodness. Well, that was a while ago. That was great. I just got a little bit to do in that, which was a gift, because actually I worked in the script development of that, in that what unusually in the UK, because it is a costly business, but it is common with some shows, is that when the scripts are being written by a team with head writers as well, they'll do script read-throughs of the first and the second draft before the channel or the cast are even attached. Yeah. And so I did that a lot. And then for a couple of series, read every single script as a sort of actor for lots of different parts. So in that sense, it was great fun. Yeah, I enjoyed it. And I've worked with Annie Griffin, the director of One Block. I've worked with her subsequently on Avenue 5. Is that what it was called?
Yes, it is.
There you go. See, there's like at various points I just sort of stopped remembering where everything it was, and it's just a job. I think it's children actually, but it's a big factor in that. Yes, I've worked with the producers, and I worked with the directors again, all sorts. So that was great. That was really good.
And I don't know if you will know this, because this is a hedge bet, but because there was a certain turn of phrase you use it. Do you know if Avenue 5's returning, and if you're going to be working on any more Avenue 5?
I don't think it is.
It was a very good program.
Yeah, and I mean it's HBO as well. So even if it was going to, it wouldn't be going now because of the strike. But I believe it's not going any further.
Well, Amanda, you have to come back to the UK and do more British led things rather than get shoved.
Yes, but here's the thing, Tom. The strike in America, they are striking to stop becoming any more like the situation already is in the UK. And it's interesting that people go, oh, because the union over here it's not mandatory to be a member of the union to work. And yet the working conditions that they in America say are unacceptable are already our working conditions. So we kind of need to level up to them. That's why people go to work in America.
Yeah. And because they've got more room in the studio to build a massive fake-looking spaceship. Oh well, because if you look at L Street Studios or Pinewood, to me, from when you watch them on screen, they look rather small, so they don't seem big enough to fit a massive spaceship that isn't real.
Wow. I filmed at Leavesden Studios a couple of times, and that's the Warner Brother owns that, and that is massive. But yes, if you were going to be filming it in like the old BBC studios, get it.
Yeah. And so throughout your career, this turn of phrase sounds like your career's over, but it's not. But
Who knows?
what's your favourite thing you've done so far?
It's a good question. I think some of my happy times have been working in theatre, actually, on things that nobody would have seen unless they happen to be in the theatre, with a really great crowd of people who I've stayed mates with over the years. And we've all subsequently gone off and done different things, like theatre directors have become teledirectors, and I've worked with in different ways. And friends who are actors have then become movement directors and intimacy coordinators, all sorts of different things. And so they have been some of my like really happy experiences. And I think I have enjoyed working on features because you get to rehearse them and you get to immerse yourself in the world more because there's more time. And again, it's been down to the people. Honestly, every job that's been brilliant has been down to the people with whom I'm working. And every job which has been less than great has also been down to the people. And that is a range of different sorts of people. But oh goodness, I don't know if I know really what I would pick if I was going to, watch my best bits of something. I wouldn't necessarily know, but I think, no, I couldn't tell you actually. I think to me, it stands out as good days or good weeks. Do you know what I mean? So there's been bits of everything, which has been the best of times.
And so coming towards the end of this glorious interview, this is part of the interview where you can tell people where to find you. Do not give away your home address because you don't want that. Where online can people track you down and see what you're up to and where they can see your glorious work?
Okay, well, I can't really be that bothered with much social media. I sort of go on to rant when I'm absolutely furious on Twitter, but otherwise I can't be bothered much now. If you want to see pictures of random stuff and or my children and or like things that make me laugh, on Instagram, I think I'm just Frogstone UK. And then with regards to finding my work, well, you'd need to search the archive, darling. I don't know where it is. I think various things have, tucked away. You can find me in episodes of all sorts on All Four and stuff like that. I think I last was maybe seen on Mammals, which was on Amazon maybe. But I'm not the best. I've never had a publicist. At one point, somebody said, you need to get PR after Bucket and, get it all out there. And I never did. And I realized I should have done. So as a consequence, I can never remember what I've just done or what's coming up. I would therefore direct people to my agent's website, United Agents, which will tell you what's upcoming. I don't know.
And Bucket is available on Acorn TV.
There you go.
So you can watch that through Amazon Prime or through its app itself. Just type Bucket, or if you're struggling to spell that, try and spell Miriam Margolyes and you'll get somewhere.
Yeah. Fair enough.
What do you think is easiest to spell? Because I know which I would find easiest to spell, and it's definitely not Miriam Margolyes. Because I'll probably even mispronounce the last name because it sounds like I'm saying the word leaves at the end.
The way you remember it is it's yes at the end. Margol, yes. But there you go.
So, there we have it. Thank you for letting me interview you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me.
And with more interviews from me, well, you can just stay tuned across the 17 YouTube channels. There's going to be one interview knocking about somewhere. Who knows? Because obviously each channel might have an interview. And let's find out where the wonderful world of Tom Mason leads me. But we have got podcasts galore, things happening. Who knows? Stay tuned. It might be a very busy 3 months. But remember, no, I've forgotten.